Hey, everybody, it's Robbie Kelman Baxter, and I am just trying to figure out how to. Hey, there we go. Hey, everybody, it's Robbie Kelman Baxter live with you with our Office Hours series, and so excited to see all of you joining us today. Um, This is a series that I, Robbie Baxter, am hosting with some of my favorite LinkedIn Learning instructors. We're going beyond the courses to talk about key skills required to thrive in today's environment. So I'd love if you could, say hi in the chat. And actually, my guest Bonnie and I were talking about what we ate most recently for breakfast and lunch. So if you want to share your favorite snack or what you've eaten most recently, I think that would be kind of fun. And also feel free throughout our live stream to share your comments, anything that we're saying that you like or that you're curious about, any questions that you have, please feel free. And now let me welcome my guest, Bonnie Biafore, an expert on project management and Microsoft Project. She has more than 30 courses on LinkedIn Learning, which I think may be a record. Bonnie, welcome. I know people are excited to learn from you. You may have a record of the most courses on LinkedIn Learning. What do you think?
No, I don't think that's true. I know that there are some other authors that have a lot more. But with all the foreign languages that my courses have been translated into, it does kind of add up.
Yeah, it's really remarkable, and the different ways that you have looked at project management. You're really kind of the meta project management expert. Like you do project management, you teach on project management, and you teach on using the project management tools. So kind of all of the areas are covered. Um, I wanted to open up, kind of taking an angle that's of particular interest to me. What is the connection, in your opinion, between project management and innovation?
Well, yeah, thanks for asking that. It's a really good question. So the way I look at it is the connection really has to do with change, because when you're looking at innovation, you're looking at changing the way things are. And projects are about making some kind of change, whether you're trying to solve a problem or take advantage of an opportunity. A project is going to produce some kind of change. In an organization, that might be, introducing like a new system, or like we're probably going to be talking about introducing some kind of subscription model into your organization. But even in like personal projects, like I just finished teaching a training session, and one of my examples was taking a vacation. And when you take a vacation, you're introducing some kind of change. You're opening yourself up to, learning about new cultures or new foods, or learning about history, whatever it is. So, and innovation it's a form of change.
Yeah, I love how you frame that. It sort of demystifies it, right? When I'm planning a trip. I think I mentioned to you to Bhutan, and we're leaving on Sunday.
So
So
it
I'm very much in the project management phase of this trip, and thinking about all the elements. As you said, sort of, what are the goals, right? What is the change I want? Well, I want to get there. I want to get the most out of my visit. Um, and I want to get home safely. There's a million details, and even when you talk to somebody else who's done something similar, they had different criteria.
Mhm.
So, I think what's sort of interesting about what you said is that it's something that everybody does, project
Mhm.
management.
Yep.
But a lot of us haven't really been trained in it, um, and are inclined to make mistakes. Um, What are some of the mistakes that you see people make when they don't use good project management principles?
Well, I think that we'll start at the beginning, because there are a lot of mistakes people can make. But one of the mistakes is not really understanding what it is you're trying to accomplish with a project. And the thing that's, I mean, if you think about it, what is so important about that is, like I actually I use this quote in my project management books. It's a quote from Yogi Berra: "If you don't know where you're going, you might not get there." And that is the thing. If you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, there's a pretty good chance that the project is not going to achieve what you were hoping for. And the reason that is that mistake comes up a lot is because quite often, if you're a project manager, you may have an executive come to you and say, "Hey, Robbie, I want you to manage this project, and this is what I want you to do." And if you just kind of say, "Okay," and walk away, you don't actually know if that executive really understands what they want. So before you like jump into it, it's like interview your customer or sponsor, and so that you make sure that you both understand what you're trying to do. And then from there, I mean, that will drive the rest of your project. So
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to underline, is to interview your sponsors, your executives, to make sure you understand what the goals are, what success is,
mhm.
um, and what they're trying to accomplish. Um, I've seen a lot of organizations, in my world of subscriptions, right? A lot of times I come in right at the moment where there's been a small experiment. It's done off in a corner somewhere, and it's been successful. And an executive says something like, "Subscriptions are the future. We have a success over here. Let's scale it. We should apply these learnings and these practices across the organization." And it's a lot harder than it sounds. And a lot of things seem to go wrong. What what do you think drives the problems when an organization has a successful small experiment and they want to implement the learnings and the success across the organization, and it doesn't happen? What do you think is making it so hard to go from great innovation, entrepreneurship, to uh, big success across the organization?
Well, when you what you're talking about, when an organization does like this small experiment, I mean, that's basically a feasibility study, right? You've done this like a pilot project, basically, to show, and you've shown, I mean, it was successful, so you've shown that this is feasible. But then what happens a lot of times is the conclusion that people come to is like, oh, well, like this was pretty easy, so let's just move forward quickly and expand it to a much larger part of the organization, without stopping to go through all of that initial upfront project planning, to make sure that you're covering all that additional complexity. And you're going to have more, for example, you're going to have more stakeholders in this project, so you may have people with, they have different expectations of what this subscription, like the model is going to deliver to them. And so there's just, you have to take the time to plan out what you're going to be doing, and think about how, um, ways that it might affect your organization that it didn't in your small experiment,
Yeah.
but then when you expand it, it does.
Yes. Yeah, that is so important. And the way you just frame that, I think, is really key. I think about an example of Electronic Arts, which I've worked with them for quite some time, and I've written about them in my books. Electronic Arts makes video games. When I came in to work with them, they had a small experiment often, I would call it a small experiment off in the corner. So old games only, so not the new titles that are really popular, but the old titles only, and only for people who are accessing the games through their PC. So not the Xbox or the, Sony PlayStation or your phones or any other type of device. So kind of a small, finite area, old games that people aren't as into, off in a corner. And, when they moved to say, hey, subscription is actually something that's really core to what we're doing here, and we want to expand it, right? There's a lot of risk, right? Because they've been selling these games, these franchise games for about $60 each, per title, and now having lots of games available, for one price. What if people no longer buy the games? What if, only the people that used to buy lots of games are the ones? And there were a lot of risks. And also the people who owned the different franchises, and who owned the relationships with channel partners were concerned about, if we change this, how does this affect our relationships? How does it, the commitments we've made to the organization as well? And, I think this is a really good example of, some of the complexity that comes up when you're trying to scale something. And I'm interested in, kind of what things you've noticed that, that in what I described that you think are sort of best practices for project management, or other things that you would be thinking about that maybe I didn't think about or we didn't mention.
Yeah, well, the one thing that you were talking about was like the channel partners and other people who are involved in this. And so going back to when you did the small experiment, you do it in this one place, you have fewer people or groups who are affected by the changes that you're introducing. And so when you expand it and you're going to expand it in your organization, you definitely have to identify who else is either going to be affected by this project and change that we're introducing, or who is going to have an effect on how we do it and what we do. So yeah, because one of the things I was talking about it this morning is in understanding your stakeholders. One of the things you not only want to know what it is that they are interested in and expect from your project, but you also want to uncover any resistance that they might have to the project. So for example, you talked about the risk of, the revenue stream for channel partners. Well, one, so you need to know to include the channel partners as stakeholders in this project. And you do need to understand that resistance because it's it's a valid, it's a valid question.
Yeah. It's funny. You're reminding me of another project that I worked on with Microsoft Office. Um, and, they had a very successful subscription model, and we were doing some things to, expand it and strengthen it and double down on it. And as the head of that group, we had a big kickoff meeting to talk about it. And the head of the group, as he's walking out, says something like, yeah, this is all great. It's very exciting. Also, remember, this is a big business, and you don't want to screw it up,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of risk. Change, the bigger the change, the bigger the risk. And so people that are holding back, your stakeholders that are not as supportive, sometimes it's about turf and it's about all the things that people blame, failed projects on. But sometimes it's about valid concerns. This is a big business. It's going really well. If we move everything to a different platform,
Yeah.
we could go dark for some period of time, and that could hurt us. Or,
Yeah.
we could lose customers, or we could lose employees. Um, so how do you get people to explain their concerns, and in a way that you can incorporate them into the broader plan or the broader strategy?
Well, I think that one of the things that comes up is sometimes, uh, and it can depend on who is in a meeting when you think let's say you have a meeting where you've got the CEO of an organization and then you have other other executives. Well, if the CEO is really gung ho for this plan or approach, but other people have concerns, they might not be willing to express those concerns in front of the CEO, right? Uh, there are a couple of things you can do. The one is, communication is really important, and pay not only listening to the words people are saying, but the unspoken communication. So if you're in the meeting and you see someone who's, leaning back in their chair, has their arms folded, maybe their facial expression that they're not excited. Now, depending on how much you know about the people, you might ask them and say, you don't, do you look as if you're not convinced, could you share, what your concerns are so that we can talk about that and, maybe come up with, a better approach to what we're trying to do. Or if you know that it might be better to take that offline, is just like let it go then, and then, but you follow up by meeting with that person or people to then talk to them and get that information from them when they're not quite on the spot.
So in that situation, for example, where the leader of a team says on their way out the door, "Don't screw this up."
Yeah.
You guys, good luck. I'm in good. You're in good hands. Just don't screw this up. As a project manager, what do you do? Do you call them back into the room at that moment, or do you like say, note to self, I need to follow up on that a little bit later?
Well, actually, the comment of, don't screw this up. I don't know that there's that much to follow up on. I mean, I suppose you could go and say, what part of it are you afraid of? Because I always talk about the constraints. You've got what you're trying to do, the amount of time you have, and the cost. And so it's like, don't screw it up because of the money we might lose, or our reputation. What is it? What are you concerned about? But on the other side, with all the other people in the room who have just heard the top person say, "Don't screw it up," um, that's a whole different situation, because now you basically have to work with your team and say, I mean, that's almost a given. If you're in a project, you want the project to succeed, which means that you are not going to screw it up. So it's just like, okay, so now now it's time to figure out how we're going to do this so we're successful. And that's I can remember projects where got executives would do just that, and I would always step in sometimes while they were still in the room and say, "Hey, can I say a few more words?" And I would then get up and I would actually explain how the project, if it were successful, was going to provide value to the people on the project team. So, because I remember one time, where like the CEO and the head of sales were just, they were talking about, oh, and this is going to bring, it's going to bring money into our organization, and it's this and this and this, and we'll be able to get more projects because we'll have, more of a reputation, in our. And meanwhile, all the developers are like sitting there going, all they heard was, we're going to have more work. So I got up and then talked about, it's like, here is how it's going to benefit you. Just
Yeah.
putting, having a different perspective.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what you're bringing up is making sure that you keep everybody enthusiastic about
Yeah.
the project. Keeping, I mean, a big part, I think, of project management that is sometimes overlooked is the change management piece, the human side, right? That when your boss says, don't screw this up, a lot of people in the room are saying, oh my God, we're going to screw this up. Why am I on this project? How can I get out of this room right now?
Yeah.
Change is scary. And while project management sounds very nice, what you pointed out at the very beginning, which is really resonating with me, is project management's about change, right? It's about you want something to be different. And when you're doing it, you can't just be all left brain and saying, this is the next thing, and let's make sure we have everything on the list. It's also saying, like, doing that scan that you talked about, looking for the person who's leaning back, looking for people who have scared looks on their faces, and making sure that you're bringing everybody along. Because they're never going to get the work done if they don't feel excited about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, whenever you're trying to accomplish something like a project, projects don't happen without people. So a lot of what you do in managing a project is working with people in different ways.
When you're evaluating a project manager, sort of, and I imagine you do this a fair amount in your consulting and coaching work. When you're, I'm sure people ask you, leadership says, is this person up to the task of leading this massive project? What do you look for when you're evaluating whether somebody is going to be successful at driving a major initiative within an organization?
Well, it's I mean, in some respects, the way you've posed that question, I guess it's a little bit easier to ask because when you have a major initiative, you're looking for a couple of different things. When you have a major initiative, that person, I mean, leadership is always important. But I think when you have the really, really big initiatives that have a broad impact, you definitely need a project manager who has leadership skills and has a lot more, I think, a lot more of the soft skills of, being able to motivate people, to work with people, because the bigger the project is, the more project management support the project manager might have. So, for example, one project that I had worked on, there was a project manager, but like he had a I can't remember what her title was, but I mean, he had two people who supported him, who actually took care of a lot of the day-to-day things. He was the one who was doing the big picture of the project. So leadership is important, but at the same time, you also need to have someone who, I think, on those sorts of things, understands the organization too.
Yeah.
Because there's, organizations, there's the culture of the organization, and with particularly with change management, you need to truly understand, how these changes fit into the overall organization's strategy and keep it in line with that strategy. Because if you start to veer from the overall strategy, you're going to lose support from the people that you need support from the most.
So this is something that I'm seeing right now, real time. So this is, Robbie getting good value from her half hour with Bonnie, which is what it's really all about, right? Is we're all learning.
Yeah.
Working with a company, the person in charge of the project, this is, subscription expansion, just like we talked about, they're new to the company. They have some subscription expertise, which nobody else in the company had, which is why they're brought in. But this is a big company that is not a subscription company.
Yeah.
They make stuff. It's a manufacturing company. You can probably guess actually, let's play a fun game. Can you guess what some of the challenges are that we're bumping into?
Well, you probably have some people who don't really understand subscriptions and what a subscription can provide. So they're uncertain about whether to even do that at all. And then you might have other people, people who are on the non-subscription side, like the way it's been done before. They could feel threatened because they're seeing, this move to something, something new.
Yeah.
And you're in the position where you don't understand all those moving pieces.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's exactly what you said. There are people that are fearful. There are people who don't understand. I'll add a couple more. There are new tasks, new
Mhm.
responsibilities that don't belong to anybody because they've never needed to be done before.
Right.
And overworked people say, that is not my job. You
Mhm.
know, you can tell me this is how we've always done things. So, use our traditional processes, but there is no new process for this. And so you have to name it, right? Someone has to name it and say, we need this new process, and then assign it. And guess what? The project manager usually, at least in my experience, does not have the authority to assign a new task. I see Temi saying stakeholder misalignment. Yes. Yes. And what do you do when you have that? If you realize, like, wow, our project manager is a great and capable person, but they don't know all the intricacies of this organization. They don't know what all the different stakeholders' values are. They're kind of bumping into this stuff too. Can a new person take on a big project management role, or would you say, that's a non-starter?
No, oh no. I mean, I think someone can take on a project management role, eh, even if they're not familiar with what's going on in that organization. Basically, I mean, companies hire contract project managers all the time, for projects. But what that project manager needs to do is, and I mean, I remember doing that, on many projects where you get in there and it's of course it's drinking from the fire hose, but you go and you learn as much as you can about all of the people involved. I had this one project where I was representing a small company within a huge telecom organization, or we were providing a product to a telecom, and it was a huge project. But it's like, after, I don't know, about 6 months, I remember the CEO of the company I was working with, we had dinner with the top people from the telecom. And afterwards he said, I had no idea how how good a relationship you had with them, and how
Huh.
how much you knew about them. And it's like, well, what did you think I was gonna do? Push numbers around in a spreadsheet? I mean, it's like, of course you have to, have a relationship with these people. So, even if you don't know it, you dive in and you just, you spend your time really getting to know what's going on.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's a nugget, another nugget that I'm going to take away, that that project management, such a big part of it is relationship building. Um, I have to admit that when I think of project managers, I think of Microsoft Project, and
Yeah.
spreadsheets and tracking and budgets and timelines, and somebody who really doesn't care that much about the people working on it, but just is like, it's Thursday, so you
Yeah.
must be ready to present.
No,
Um,
that's not I mean, it's part of the job, but it is not the most important part of the job.
okay, so we're at about the half hour. So sadly, we have to wrap up, but I am loving our conversation. Do you have anything that any final words to send the group off with, or any um, resources that you think would help people who are um, feeling challenged by a big project that they're tasked with leading? or being led by.
Yeah, right.
Or being,
Well, the one thing I would say is, I mean, if people are working on big projects, I will guess that, you know, they actually know something about managing projects. And in that case, you might want to subscribe. I have a weekly newsletter called Bonnie's Project Pointers, and I've been doing that, I think I've been doing it for 3 years if I've counted it up correctly. So I there's a lot of material out there, and it's free, and it tends to get into uh, it gets into more detail and more fine points of challenges that project managers have. So it kind of it's a way to really expand your knowledge and get to the next level.
is this the Bonnie's Project Pointers that's on LinkedIn?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. I just put that into the chat so people can see it.
Great.
Which I think will be a great asset. And I would also encourage people to check out all of your courses, or maybe one course this week and another course next week, because 30 courses is a lot, even for the full-time students among us. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for spending time with us today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. This is really fun. I was glad that I was glad that we met through our instructor group, and I'm glad we made this happen.
Yeah. Oh, me too. Me too. And for those of you who joined us today, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to be meeting about once a month. Our next one is November 17th with Natalie Nixon, a mutual friend of ours, talking about getting more creative by balancing wonder and rigor. And then actually the next day I have another one, Modern Business Development and Partnerships, with Ben Gomez Casares. So please join us and follow Bonnie and follow me if you want more on innovation, project management, and subscriptions. And with that, I'll say goodbye and best wishes. Bye, everybody.